Hi guys. Okay, so we're going to be doing law of sines and cosines. So far we've done trigonometry with right triangles, but we can use trig with non-right triangles. In order to do so, we need to be using the law of sines and cosines. So first, let's talk about law of sines. First, law of sines is, there's two ways to write it. So we could do little a over sine big A, little b over sine big B, little c over sine big C. Remember, capital letters indicate an angle and lowercase letters indicate a side length, okay? But we could also switch this up. So you could use this way, or you could have your ratios be like this with signs on top and side lengths on the bottom. It doesn't matter, whichever one you prefer. The only thing is you can't mix it up. Like you couldn't do A sine capital A and then sine B capital B. It doesn't work that way. You have to have signs on top or all signs on bottom. Okay. When we are using law of sines, we only need two of these ratios. We don't need all of the ratios. So we'll pick and choose based on what we have of which two we want to use. Do we want to use the A's? Do we want to A and the C? Do we want to use A and B or B and C or all those different combinations we could use? Okay. So let's start this problem. So it says solve the triangle when A equals 32 degrees and AB is 8 and BC is 5. That's all that was given to us. We don't have another we're not given a triangle or anything like that. So let's go ahead and make this triangle. We're talking about A, B's, and C's, so it doesn't matter. Now, a lot of times, kids kind of get stuck on, well, how do I know how big one angle to make and one angle not to make? It doesn't matter. So this one does, it does kind of look like 32, which is fine. But this A, it could have been given to us as 132, and we can still say that this angle is 132. It doesn't matter. It's just a visual representation that helps us solve. So let's go ahead and label what we have. So A is 32. AB is 8. And BC is 5. If you look at these definitely look like the same length. But again, it doesn't really matter. Okay? All right, so here's what we're given. It says solve the triangle, which means we need to find all of the pieces that are missing. So every triangle has 6 pieces. They have 3 angles. So we got measure angle A, measure angle B, measure angle C. We also have these side lengths. So in this case, they're calling them capital AB, capital BC, like this type of a thing. Or we can do like 5. They say BC is 5. We could say little a is 5, whichever one you want. I think let's go ahead and do little ABC just to kind of stay consistent with what we have in our formula. And it's a little bit simpler. Okay, so we need all 6 of these things. 3 of them are already given to us, so let's go ahead and put that in there. So we know A is 32 degrees. We don't know what B is. We don't know what C is. AB is going to be little c, right? That's going to be little c length because it's opposite of big C. AB is 8. And then we also know what this is little a. We know little a is 5. So we need to find B, C, and little b. Okay, so like I said, we do have law of cosines to do too. We don't know what law of cosines is yet. If this didn't tell us that we were using law of sines, we'd have to figure it out. One easy way to determine that we can use law of sines is we have to have both A's or both B's or both C's to use law of sines. If we didn't have this A, and let's say we had angle B or side B, then we couldn't use law of sines. We'd have to use law of cosines. Okay, so since we have both A's, we can use law of sines. Looking at our formula, we know we want to use this guy. So we're going to set up a ratio with our A and then our B ratio, and then we're going to set up an A to our C. Okay, so let's go ahead and just write those formulas out. Again, it doesn't matter if you have a little a on top or little a on bottom. So if you're doing it with signs on top, that's fine. It does not matter. And again, we're going to set up another ratio with the sign A that we have, and we're going to set it up with the C. Okay, so let's start plugging in the things that we know. We know little a is 5, and we know big A is 32. We know little a is 5, and we know big A is 32. Okay. Little b, we do not know. Oh, no, and sine b, we do not know. So here, one equation, two unknowns, we can't do anything with that one yet. Let's look at this guy. Sine c, little c, we do know is 8. Sine big C, we don't know. Okay, so this fraction or ratio has one unknown, so we can start with that proportion, okay? So let's go ahead and cross multiply, because when we have a fraction equals a fraction, we can cross multiply. Remember the constants go out front of the sign first, or whatever trig function we're talking about. Instead of like sine 32 times 8, we do 8 sine 32. We want to solve for c, so let's get rid of this 5, because if it's like 5x, right? So we got to get rid of that 5. So 5, divide by 5, use our handy dandy calculator. So I can put this whole thing in on top. So I'm going to put 8 sine 32. I'm not going to do divided by 5 right now. If I do divide by 5 without closing that parenthesis, it's going to take the sine of 32 divided by 5 degrees. That's not what it's taking the sine of. It's taking the sine of just 32. That quantity now divided by 5. Okay, so super important. Make sure you do just the numerator. So we're going to get that guy and close that parenthesis if we'd like. Okay, so on top we have 4.23935 and then divided by 5. And I know I showed this once on an earlier video, but we'll do it again. So instead of typing this whole thing in again and then divided by 5, since it's our last entry in our calculator, we can just go ahead and push divide by 5. So it takes this whole value in there for the answer and divide by 5. It only works with the last answer that you have. Okay, so we get, what's on the left side? Sine C is left on the left side. Equals on the right side, we have this guy. Okay, we need to solve for C, which we learned was doing inverse trig functions, right? So then we're going to take this and multiply by sine inverse, and this and multiply by sine inverse. So the signs go away, we're left with just a C. So we have sine inverse of 0.84787, blah, 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 blah. This one, again, is our last answer we had in there, right? So we can just go ahead and say second sine inverse. And then this time, the answer is the second part, right? So I can't just push the division sign now and it will show up. But let me show you how you can get it. If you look above your negative key, there's an A and S in blue. So then we can push the second button, an A and S, and there's the answer. Again, it's the last answer, not anything above it, the last one. So we'll push enter on that guy. So we have C is equal to 57.9808, blah, 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 blah. This one doesn't specify how to round, but it absolutely will on Canvas for you. So let's go ahead and round this guy to the nearest degree, because that's pretty darn close to 58 degrees. So that's one of the 3 pieces that we needed. Okay, now looking back at this other ratio that we talked with, we're still kind of stuck, right? There's nothing, we have 2 unknowns, so we can't really solve for using this ratio yet. But look at this. We have 2 of 3 angles, and we know a triangle is made up of 180 degrees. So we could say 180 minus 32 minus 58, and that's going to give us angle B. So let's go ahead and do that. We had to find the other angle first before we could do that, right? Okay, so we get angle B is 90 degrees. Okay, that's just happened to be a coincidence. If we knew it was a 90-degree triangle, we could have been doing just regular sine, cosine, and tangent instead of the law, okay? So we're going to go ahead and change this guy into 90 because we know it's a 90 now. And then we can do cross multiplication again. So cross multiply, so we're going to get 5 sine 90 equals b sine 32. We're solving for little b, so it's being multiplied by sine of 32, which means we should divide by sine 32. Divide by sine 32. Okay, so we get little b. Now let's go ahead and plug this in. So we have 5 sine 90, and that there's more than one thing in the numerator. So let's make sure we're getting the numerator value and then the denominator value and dividing. So 5 sine 90, which happens to be 5, over sine 30.2. So I could do this guy divided by, so my second answer, divided by sine 32. We put in sine 32. And we get 9.43539, blah, 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 right? So that means little b, let's round to the nearest tenth, is going to be 9.4. So little b is 9.4, and we found that big B was 90 earlier. So now we have all of the pieces of the triangle. So when it says solve the triangle, that means all 6 pieces need to be found. Usually 3 of those are given to us. Let's see if we have another one. That's it for lob signs.